Welcome. My name's Randy Gregg. I'm one of the ringleaders of City of Possibility. Thank you. My colleague, William Smith, will be here in a little bit. So we started this whole thing about a little over a year ago, and the first manifestation was this big exhibit we did. How many got to see that? Wow, okay, we got a constituency. Well, just to catch others up, we had about 90 practitioners and 12,000 square feet of space and a whole bunch of architectural models, and some of them historic and some of them by contemporary practitioners. And a whole lot of people got involved. It was a real tent raising, so we were really super happy about it. I want to get a little bit of a sense of who you all are. How many are from the architecture world? Okay. How many are city people, bureaucrats or politicians? Okay. Lynn, you're a politician, but she's regional. You're not taking any responsibility for this. Okay, great. How many of you just care about your city? Is that why you're here? Okay, awesome. Well, this whole thing grew out of a real urge to kind of regenerate the dialogue around design in Portland. Those of us who have been around, remember when it was a very robust thing, and the interaction with government and private sector and design was, bred a lot of really interesting things for Portland. And that kind of died for a lot of different reasons, but we wanted to regenerate it with, among other things, an entirely new generation. And so that's what we've been trying to work on. We did a whole bunch of programs with City of Possibility. This was the opening at the museum. Had about 750 people there on a Sunday afternoon, as Thomas Robinson says, to hear about master plans. So it just kind of gives you the sense of the depth of nerdom in Portland. We had some great sponsors for that and great partners. I'll just spin past these because hopefully they'll re-up. It was just a really great group effort, citywide effort. But now we're on to City of Possibility Phase 2. And I want to call out our first three sponsors for this phase. Columbia Bank, which is great, which is our first outside of the AEC and foundation world, so it's really great to have them on board. North Star Civic is both our fiscal sponsor and also a financial supporter, and then Cascadia partnership came on. And it's kind of the three tiers there that we've done. So we had some great contributors to City of Possibility, but it ranged from $20,000 to $500,000. And then there's all of you, who supported by paying admission. It was amazing to see what people did. So many people, we did a sliding scale. We didn't want to turn anybody away. But it was amazing how many people signed up for $20 and how many people in this room did, and we really appreciate that. It helps us a lot. And then occasionally for the exhibition, we'd get an admission, somebody put 200. It was really fulfilling. So we started Phase 2 with looking at how downtown could better connect to the waterfront. As some of you know, Metro Regional Government is funding a design competition for Waterfront Park. And we've kind of thought that there was an opportunity to expand the scope of that. It was originally intended for the so-called Hawthorne Bowl. If you go to the Blues Festival, that's where that's at. But we thought it was an opportunity to look at the whole park, but also how downtown could connect to the park, because it's kind of cut off. And so we did a one-day charrette. We got about 30 really talented urban designers and creatives in the room, and about 20 folks from city government. And we just kind of opened up the Pandora's box of ideas, and there was a lot of really great ideation in that. But what we came up with is this idea of trying to create some really strong corridors to connect the west side of the city to the waterfront. And the city has taken that to heart, and Bureau of Planning and Sustainability hired Mayor Reed to do a more detailed study of this, and that's in progress right now. The design competition is being expanded to a look at the whole park, and so we played a small role in that, and it feels really good. And We had, and we've been trying to bring elements of inspiration to this, which is what this talk is about tonight. We had a wonderful meeting with the mayor and the whole team, multi-bureau team that is working on this project, both from the downtown side and from the waterfront side. And so this is really starting to take shape, and we're really proud of the work that we've been able to contribute to it. But enough about all of that. I mean, basically what we're trying to do is build a constituency for change. And that's what we really have to do. I think everybody's been kind of grumpy and scared and just worried and wanting things to be different, and lots of different people doing different things. And what we're trying to do is get everybody's eyes on the horizon for this. So Carol's going to help us do that. Carol Coletta has really spent her career building constituencies for change. Memphis native, she began her urban work in the 70s when she produced public events to bring people back downtown to Memphis, to downtown Memphis, developed the first new residential conversion project, and even started and ran Memphis's first new boutique. This is all in her 20s. She went on to start Art Place, a collaboration among national foundations with the National Endowment for the Arts that brought the idea of creative placemaking to cities across the country. She's led major initiatives to uplift urban innovation and civic assets like parks and libraries at the Knight Foundation and the Kresge Foundation. Then in 2018, she went to work back home. Where over about the next 6 to 8 years, she ran the Memphis River Parks Partnership, overseeing the creation of new vision for managing 6 miles of waterfront and 26 properties along the Mississippi River. And she led the $61 million renovation of Tom Lee Park, which you're going to hear about tonight, and the completion of the River Garden and Fourth Bluff Park. She's now a Bloomberg Public Innovation Fellow at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation at Johns Hopkins University. And some news. Carol just won one of the most prestigious awards for urbanists in the country, the Urban Land Institute Visionary Prize. And so please welcome and please congratulate Carol Coletta.
Okay, so how many of you have done the math? Okay, yep, a few of you, but okay, so Randy gets up and tells you, in my 20s, it was the 70s. It's like, okay, I thought you were my friend, but not so much anymore, Randy. Okay, so I have to take a picture of you guys before I start, because this Bloomberg, for some reason, they always want a photo when I go out and speak. I don't get it, but anyway, so everybody smile, whatever, ta-da, hello, I love it, I'm gonna take pictures over here. I'm gonna tell them that's not overlapping, there were just millions of people at this speak. Okay, so, wow, what a great week to be in Portland. Yay, Portland! Yay! Okay, thank you for inviting me to this hellscape, otherwise known as Portland, or depending on your point of view and whether you know what year it is, to the place of unruly joy, which I loved. Saw that on Facebook, the naked bike ride guy. Are you the guy? Were you naked? That's the part I don't get, but okay. If it works for you, I'm good with it. Okay, so we were talking about this morning at City Hall. Whatever impressions you think are left over about Portland from 2020, I think they are now buried beneath indelible images of dancing inflatable animals. Right? Which is so Portland. I just love it. You guys always know how to make it weird and wonderful, and just bravo. I think you've got exactly the right response. And some of you may know that, before they said they were coming to your city and you fought back, they're in my city. and frankly, in my parks, but that's a story for another day. All right, so I want to consider tonight, I love, Randy, what you're doing, City of Possibility. I just love it. I love it. And, I wish we were doing it in my city. Maybe we'll have to get you to come speak and tell us how to do it. But tonight is for considering what's next for the Portland riverfront in the same spirit, making places to support public life that is brave and joyful and unique to Portland. I remember on one of my earliest visits to Portland, I recall walking through your waterfront park for the first time, and to have so much linear space, public space on any urban waterfront, and it was impressive. And then I learned how you made that space, taking it back from docks and then taking it back from a road. I thought, okay, yes, I'm home. I love Portland. Because that's again, it made me a forever fan. And I was inspired by your good sense and your civic boldness. If any time, any moment has ever called for civic boldness and good sense, it's now. And I don't think what you're grappling with is really about a park or design A versus design B. I mean, that's part of it, but I think those are just responses to a much larger question, which is, who are we when we come together? Because that's really what public space supports. I think that is its purpose. And many of you are probably wondering, although maybe not so much this week as 2 weeks ago, is coming together even possible today? I mean, I certainly wonder that. And can we bridge the divides that separate us from them? And it's funny, living in a majority Black city, often labeled as less than, I sometimes doubt that we can come together. So on many days, bridging divides seems like a pipe dream, especially now, especially when powerful voices amplified by the unchecked algorithms spew vitriol all day, every day. But then I get a chance to go to the park we built on the river, and my hope for places of belonging and connection is renewed, not because of what we built, but of who we built it for. And we had this discussion today about, who are you really building public space for? And we had a very deep commitment to build a riverfront for all. And even though a riverfront for all. And I think, if I were anybody in marketing here, communications, right? Anything for all sounds like a junior marketer's, like naive, oh yeah, we're gonna do it for everybody. Well, nothing appeals to everybody. But when you're dealing with public space, I think that is your challenge. That is the imperative, to work every day with a public mandate, literally for all. And that takes a lot of thought and a lot of care. You know this. I mean, your sidewalks are public space, and they can be difficult to manage. But it really takes smart narrative, smart design, smart management, smart programming. Nothing about it is easy. But again, I think that's the job of being public, especially at this fraught moment. So I want to just say up front, you, not me, are the experts on Portland, and you, not me, will decide what to do with your waterfront. But what I want to do tonight is to share with humility what we built in Memphis and why, And I can tell you some things I've learned from that experience and from the experience of a lot of other places around the country. So I hope that will be helpful as you think about what your next move is on the waterfront. I want to talk to just a minute about downtown, because I know that's been a sore spot for you, and like every city in America, you're trying to recover from COVID, trying to, and with all the changed habits of that COVID left with us, how does a downtown, what is the purpose of a downtown? And, and how do we think about it going forward? Because I think we're all still trying to adapt our cities, and particularly our downtowns, to the behaviors that we acquired in our what I'll call our stay-at-home year, powered by increasingly, sophisticated, ubiquitous technology. The convenience that we discovered by working at home and being entertained at home lulled us into new habits that are hard to break. And frankly, a lot of us don't want to break all of those habits. While the new way of working, this hybrid way of working has benefited a lot of neighborhoods, right? The neighborhoods, as someone was saying today, the neighborhoods are great. It has negatively affected not only this downtown, but a lot of others. So we're trying to figure out, we know the future is not going to look like the past. It never does. And particularly with such a change in the way we live, then downtown, we have to figure out how to take this infrastructure and adapt it to our new ways of being. And so it's not the first dislocation downtowns have suffered. It won't be the last, but I think, just 3 quick things to bring downtowns back. We all know this. It's no great insight. But I think the first is to make it clean, green, and safe. And if you don't do that, nothing else works. I mean, it's absolutely foundational. People are not going to do what you think they ought to do. They're going to do what they think they ought to do and they want to do. And for people who have an option about where to be, they are going to pick places that are clean, green, and safe. So it's just, that's fundamental. You got to get that right. I think the second thing, again, we all know this, is diversifying land uses. We've got too much office space, probably too little residential. We've got to think, what do we want to become as a downtown? Can we make it the region's best neighborhood? And what would that really look like? Finding the institutional uses, schools, medical facilities, cultural facilities. I think all of those produce, footfall that downtown certainly needs. And that's one of the reasons I think we're talking about Waterfront Park. On the other hand, let me just say, I also think it's really critical as residential population increases in a downtown, what you don't want to do is allow downtown to become just another neighborhood or develop a parochialism, which is, now that I'm here, shut the door, no one else needs to be here, or we don't want noise, we actually don't want that bar across the street. You can, if you're not careful, too much residential in downtowns will also change it so fundamentally it's no longer can be identified as a downtown. So I think you have to be a little careful about that. But it's really clear that a downtown has so many assets. The walkability, the convenience, the mix of uses, the ability to, ditch one car and at minimum. If you're a 2-car family, those are the kinds of things that are actually easier to do in a downtown than any place else. So it's one of the things we should do. And then just, I think to evolve our downtowns to changing conditions, we should remember that, spaces that support vibrant, visible, joyful public life are really magic makers. And, when we're thinking about public life, Randy, maybe it was, we had this discussion this morning. Now, this notion of there are these boxes that public life fits in, parks and libraries and community centers and art centers. But I think what's really interesting and should really be part of the discussion is how do you start to think outside those boxes for public space and public life? And what might that look like? And again, I appreciate these folks right here in the front row because they are going to live very differently, and they want different things, and they're very hybrid, right? They're living hybrid lives, and I think our spaces are going to have to reflect that and support that. So what do really hybrid spaces, public spaces begin to look like? I mean, are we going to be precious about park space not having commercial activity in it? Or is that something then that, it strengthens public space to have commercial activity in it? So it's sort of getting out of the traditional boxes we think in and moving beyond. So look, it's impossible to think about Waterfront Park without thinking about downtown and vice versa. And if we can, it seems to me, not we, you, if you can make these two things work together and think about them not separately, but as connected and combined, that's going to make both stronger. So just to think about that. Workers, just one final thought about downtown, and again, it's obvious, but workers used to have to show up in downtown, right? I mean, I've got to show up to the office 5 days a week. And so now, that's out the window. So we have to have a place where people want to be, and they want to be for multiple reasons, and they want to be there over extended periods of time. And that's just going to require that we think really differently. So, I think if these two are thought of as one and complementary to one another, that can be a real reason for people to come to downtown, spend time downtown, because the Waterfront Park, neither the Waterfront Park nor the assets downtown can be duplicated, should be duplicated in any other neighborhood. So to me, that's kind of the core of the competitive advantage and sort of where you start, that journey of coming back. So I'm going to switch to Memphis, and I want to set some context about the work we've done there. The Mississippi River at Memphis is at its widest and wildest. We have a very dynamic river that rises and falls up to 40 feet a year. Someone asked me today, this is the place in Portland where you can touch the river. Where can you touch the river in Memphis? I said, you really don't want to touch the river, because if you do, you may end up in New Orleans. You got to be really careful. Directly across from downtown Memphis is Arkansas floodplain. And in May, none of that land on the right side of that screen can be seen. It's all underwater. So at times, it feels like the river just goes forever, certainly as far as you can see. It's interesting, Memphis is on a high bluff. And so the city rises up on the bluff east of the river, and then negotiating your way down to the banks of the river, you encounter the bluff, then railroad tracks, then a 4 or 5 lane road as of today, and then you get to the park, and then you get to the river. So just to kind of set the stage, it's not a great condition, makes access very difficult. And, frankly, until recently, once you got to the river, the experience was, the payoff for all that negotiating was pretty puny. Adjacent to the core of downtown, we had 2 small, sleepy parks that had Confederate associations. One of them had a statue that had to be removed. We have this narrow, deteriorating sidewalk running along a 6-block length of our historic cobblestone landing, and then we had this featureless 31-acre park at the south end of our downtown. I mean, there's nothing really much joining them up north-south or northeast-west from the river to the city. Well, that began to change in 2016 when the Kresge Foundation funded a trip to see riverfronts that I organized. I made them work so hard. We saw 4 riverfronts in 3 cities in 4 days. I know. They didn't have time to go off to the bar and drink or take cell phone calls. I made them focus. And it worked because on the last afternoon we were standing at the Spruce Street Harbor over the Delaware River in Philadelphia. It's our last stop. And they all looked at each other and they said, why have we done so little with our riverfront? And so, you know, one of those great things about those civic trips, right? If people learn the right lessons, you know, they come home like they see their city with new eyes. And the good thing is they didn't say, why didn't we do this with our riverfront? You know, they said, why haven't we done something with our riverfront? And that to me was part of the curation of the trip, is to make sure that they knew we couldn't do what was on the Delaware River. We didn't have the Delaware River. You know, we couldn't do what Detroit had done on its river. We didn't have that river either. We had a very different condition, and whatever we did in Memphis had to respond to Memphis conditions. And that trip was a continuation of our journey to rethink our riverfront. The first steps had been baby steps. The prior year, they had run a winter ice rink in a park. And the following summer, we closed the major street and activated a block with skating rink and basketball courts. And so 3 things happened following the trip. At the urging of 2 foundations, one national, one local, the mayor appointed a riverfront task force that was staffed by an existing nonprofit riverfront conservancy that had basically cleaned and maintained the riverfront for 20 years, but had only built 1 project. There was very little from their efforts that the city could see and enjoy. Second thing happened, the mayor's task force commissioned Studio Gang to develop a riverfront concept for the major pieces of our 6 miles of riverfront. And then 3, we started building. While the concept was being developed, we went ahead and tackled those 2 small 1 square block parks. And they turned out and that turned out to be in hindsight, a critical decision. By the year following our trip, so 2016 we did a trip, 2017 we had our riverfront concept in hand, and by 2018 we delivered, there's the riverfront concept, and that's online if anybody's interested. But we developed this park, River Garden. We changed Jefferson Davis Park into River Garden, and it was beautifully landscaped. Memphians just fell in love with it, and then, you know, it was kind of love at first sight. It was a great little park. We did it for no money. We just scrapped out the money to do it, and it was great. We built it with a bunch of kids building projects in it with us, and we kept their projects in the park for the longest time. It was very cool. And then in the next year, 2019, that's the other thing we did. We for the first time ever, we did a kayak pop-up, which meant for the first time ever, people who did not own a boat or didn't have a friend who owned a boat could actually get, not on the river, but on our Slackwater Harbor. And that was hugely popular. And it was a revelation for people. And of course, they were able to see the city from a different angle. So I'm all about getting people on the water. Then the next year, the same night we opened that River Garden, we also opened a 1.0 version of 5-mile bike ped trail. So we did a lot of things at once, right? 2018, that was a big year. Then 2019, we opened this park, this is the one with the statue. We took the statue out, and it became Fourth Bluff Park. And with a statue in it, there are a lot of things that couldn't happen in that park, right? There are a lot of people who wouldn't feel comfortable in that park. But this is what happened when we redid the park, and it just became the scene of such joy and celebration. And we would only hope we're that good this year. It doesn't look, preseason is very unpromising in Memphis. Like, I'm just hoping the Stars get well soon. Okay, so that same year, 2019, we decided we would tackle our biggest project yet, called Tom Lee Park. It's a really interesting park. It's 31 acres, exactly the same size as your waterfront park. Also very, very linear, but a little wider than your park, right? But not that much, and skinny in places. So anyway, we decided to tackle that. And it was the riverfront park. We picked it because it had the easiest access to and from downtown, very similar to Waterfront Park. And it was big enough to provide significant amenities to our city residents and regional visitors. But I don't think it ever would have happened, Randy, without those early projects that we did. So I think running fast in the beginning and proving that proof of concept was really important to getting this big park done. But it was very, 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 very hard for Memphians to even imagine something happening here, and I'm going to show you why. It was just hard to imagine as anything other than what it was. But Studio Gang, who had done the concept, we chose Studio Gang and the landscape architecture firm Scape, a phenomenal team, both led by women. Sorry, guys. So as we didn't want to lose momentum, and we didn't want to lose the knowledge that Studio Gang had gathered in the concept. So we just kept them working. And again, they turned out to be a phenomenal team to work with all the way through design, construction, and even post-construction. They've been great. So this park, our 31 acres, is built, it started actually as a garbage dump. And this is where the city garbage came down and came over the road and into the little bit of land and then the river itself. And this was a dike wall that U.S. Army Corps built to shore up the bluff to the east. It was built 35 years ago, 1991. And the city's initial response to this was to just put some bad soil on top, put some pathways through it, and put a few benches and a few, not many lights, few lights, and but 2 parking lots. Had to have a parking lot. So, they called it a park. I call it a park in waiting, because for years it was known. Well, look, it was known for 2 things. It was known for this was this patch of land. You can see how tiny it is there, that you would look out over so you could have this clear, expansive view of the river. There it is in more modern times, but you see there's more land, but nothing there. And it was, so that's one thing. I need my clear view from my car of the river. And the other is for a 7-day festival that happened every May called Memphis in May. It had a music festival, it had a barbecue cooking contest, and every year you can see this. You see all that dirt? Yeah, well, that's what happened every single year. And so they did their deal in May, mid-May. By mid-May, they were done. They moved out of the park. And then June, July, August, the park was, it was muddied. It was, they would muddy it up, rut it up, tear it up, trash it up, because the belief was, well, nobody uses this park. Not true, but that became a real bone of contention that maybe I'll tell you about. So after months of negotiation with this festival on the design of the park, the designers were able finally to extract a very specific set of specs. from the festival on the dimensions of the space and the festival, what the festival needed to produce its events. And we talked about this a little bit today, and I just want to say a word about this. I love special events. People love special events, right? They love music festivals, yay. Cinco de Mayo, yay. But I think you can over-design for, or under-design, radically under-design, or over-design for events, and then the park doesn't work for all, right? It doesn't work every day. And you gotta be really careful that you don't design for events that leaves a park empty on a daily basis. And that comes from a good design hand, but mainly it comes from a value that whoever is leading the design needs to hold on to, right? I mean, they've got to exert that and assert that value, or it will get lost. And one interest will outweigh the other. So if you really intend to do a park that serves both, that can be done. And we've done it, I'll show you. But you've got to be really clear on the front end what you're building for and who you're building it for. So after a lot of civic battling that sometimes turned brutal and very personal, by the way, I have an offshore account. I have not been able to find it yet, but if I do, I'll let you know. But the final design was presented in May 2020. May 2020, it was all done online. We raised $61 million for the park, most of that during COVID. A lot of people, our first donors were $1,000 donors over 3 years. We had people giving $20 a month. It was kind of a whole flip on how you raise money for, how you raise $61 million, but we did it. Anyway, in fact, it's funny, we didn't let COVID slow us down. It sped us up because we didn't have a lot of competition for workers, and construction started soon thereafter. The park opened Labor Day 2023. It was delivered on time, on budget, at less than $2 million an acre, which is significantly below the cost of most comparable parks. And as I love to say, we went from pop-up to plan to 3 parks and a bike ped trail in 8 years, which I think is that's moving pretty fast. And we're really proud of that. I want to show you what we built, but we talked about today momentum. There comes a moment, when you feel like if we don't go now, we're not going to be able to go. It's like that moment comes, and I think you're at a moment. Like all of a sudden, you've recaptured the national attention. Like people know Portland again, and they're cheering for Portland again, and not on some fake thing, fake narrative, fake brand. I mean, it's like Portland, yeah. And so you have a moment right now, and I would ask, what are you going to do with that civic moment? That's why I think it's a perfect time to consider City of Possibility, right? The possibilities just got much more real for Portland. And now, what do you do? So I'm going to show you what we did, because we had a moment as well. So we started, let's see, I'm going to show you what we built, but that's just under construction. So yeah, we were under construction. And we opened. And so I'm just going to go through some of the features. We built the park, I guess that's what I was trying to show you. We built the park around these 3 big lawns, and then we concentrated the activity at the intersections of those lawns. The good thing about that is it could still accommodate festivals, big festivals. But there was still lots of activity, and every time you walked a lawn, you came to another activity center, and so, you can see it from, each lawn. So you've got a view of what you want to walk to next, which is great. So we built finally the first ADA accessible way to get from the top of the bluff to the bottom of the banks. It's called the Cut Bank Bluff. It is an absolutely beautiful, this is early in its life, and now it's so lush and wonderful. But one of the key features, once you arrive down at the bottom, we have this great water feature, which of course everybody loves water features, especially in Memphis heat. There's also movable seating and in a grove up top. Then you come down to the next sort of centerpiece of the park. You've got a playground, a fabulous monstrum playground that we developed that is very risky. I'm not sure if we had been a city versus a 501c3 that we ever would have gotten the playground approved. I mean, obviously it is playground, certified and all that, but there's some interesting risks in there. Beautiful, this wonderful sunset deck on the edge of the Mississippi. That's what you're looking at there. This is the centerpiece of the park. It's right across from the playground, so that the parents' deck at the playground, you can turn around and watch what's going on in the sunset canopy. This has a beautiful story. This was supposed to be the Hyde Sunset Canopy. Pitt and Barbara Hyde. Pitt is the founder of AutoZone and a great civic leader in Memphis, the reason the National Civil Rights Museum exists, and a lot of other things. They were going to have this name on the canopy, and they called me one Saturday at home and said, "We've been thinking about this, and we had just experienced in Memphis the very tragic murder of Tyree Nichols at the hand of Memphis police officers. Just incredible tragedy. And the city was such a power keg, and it could have blown up. And at the worst possible moments in their lives, Tyree Nichols' mother and stepfather called for peace on the streets and got it. There was no civic unrest as a result of, I think, very strongly their call for peace. And Barbara and Pitt said, we're going to take our name off the canopy, and we want you to we want you to dedicate the canopy in the memory of Tyree Nichols and in honor of the courage his parents showed in their call for peace, which I thought was just, there are not many donors who would have done that. And it was very, very true to the spirit of what we were doing on the riverfront. And I still get a little choked up when I talk about it because it was a big deal. We had the most beautiful dedication. Anyway, I'll show you some other pictures because I just think this, and you should appreciate this, it's timber. This is from our Tennessee Mass Choir on opening day. We paraded people through the park. It was so gorgeous. And as you get farther, now you can see we left the canopy and the playground. We come back down to this is the end of the south end of the second lawn, and there you start to see the one piece of art that existed. We reset it in this beautiful setting, and a new piece of art here and here that was done by Theaster Gates called A Monument to Listening. And I want to tell you something about this artwork, but just remember the name Tom Lee. Remember, this was built on a dike wall. Remember, it was absolutely flat. It had 5 trees. Again, this is right at the opening photograph, probably right before it opened. So all of this landscape is much bigger now, 2 years later, and much more flush. But it was really quite beautiful from day one, and you can begin to see the topography, which just for Memphians is like, oh my God, a hill, which is kind of cool. And there you can see it again. So people were they couldn't find their way around in the beginning. And then you get to the final south end of the park, where we have this gorgeous eco lawn and everything completely changes. The park gets very quiet. My favorite part of the park gets very quiet. It's very natural. It's just incredibly beautiful. And it's just sort of you and the river. It's a very peaceful place. And you can see there's another, we cut a path through there, which was intended from the beginning. And then if you keep going south, there is a pollinator lab, and we have a whole curriculum built around the park that is meets Tennessee standards, and kids are down there all the time studying outdoors, which is just great. Then we're building actually a new addition to the park that is just to the south of this. It's the first, it will be the first overlook on the Mississippi River called the Flyway. And my great colleague yesterday just got another $1 million for it, which was the last money. And so that will, it's under construction, and we will open that, they will open that first of the year. So we're excited. And so we, to the 5 original trees, we added 1,000 native trees to the riverfront. We moved 100,000 cubic yards of dirt. We placed 800 plus tons of stones, laid 30,000 square yards of sod, and planted 115,000 native plug grasses. And as I promised, this is a festival layout. This was pre-festival, and you can begin to see the tents in the distance. It laid out absolutely beautifully for the special event, and there was no speaking acquaintance to the earlier festival, and people were just stunned. So we're fortunate. The park has won a lot of awards, including National Design Award from the American Society of Landscape Architects, the ULI America's Award for Excellence, that was a big deal, the 2025 Regional and Urban Design Award from the American Institute of Architects. Again, all recognition that we're really proud of. But the park, Tom Lee Park, that we have today was born of small moves that helped people see what was possible on the riverfront. However, I talk about small moves that we built on, great, created momentum, great. But we were resolute that we could not build Tom Lee Park in stages. The COO of our city told me at one point, he was really trying to get me to stop. And he said, just build the cut bank bluff, and Memphians won't know the difference. They will think you have built them a great park, that first, piece that comes down. That's a true story. But I knew if we stopped, if we paused, I didn't think we could ever get the momentum back. So we kept going and hoping we would raise the money, by the time it was finished, and in fact, we were able to do so. He kept arguing for a minimum viable product, and that would have been exactly the wrong thing to do in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis needed to see ambition. We needed to be able to picture it. This is what it looks like. And the great news is, out of that ambition has come a second big project for the riverfront that's being built right across the street from me. I live in the presence of this project. It is a Herzog and Demeron building for the Memphis Art Museum, which is moving from one small location, outdated location, to right on the riverfront. They're, as you can see, their rooftop will be used for events and overlook the river. So it is great to see the catalytic effect that the building that park has meant for the city. It's great to see, and we hope there's that continues. I will say one thing: I am so envious of you for your waterfront park and the connectivity you have to your downtown. it's very, and I know that City Hall's thinking about that now, where are the connection points, strengthening the connection points, the arrival points, so that downtown and the waterfront park make more sense together as one. We don't have that kind of connection, and you're blessed with it, so make the most of it. Okay, but as impressive as the park is, and it has this wow design, that's not enough to support the public life that we urgently need to reweave the social fabric in our cities. We were fortunate that in our location, and reweave the social fabric in Memphis, particularly across class, across income. We were in a position, it's one of the advantages of our downtown location. We were next to a downtown where higher income people were living, but also on the south and the north, we were ringed by very distressed neighborhoods, some of which are the most distressed in the state of Tennessee. And so, our challenge was, how do you get high income and low income to share the same space at the same time joyfully? And that's the tougher trick. So the management of the space is, I think, much harder than designing the space, because you can control what you design, you can control what you build, but you can't control the behavior of people. You can't control who shows up. And you can't control whether people feel like they belong there, whether they're welcome there. I mean, our job is to nudge it along, but you can't control whether people see, see expansion of belonging as progress or a threat. And so, again, you can't control behavior, but you can do everything you can to nudge it along, and that's what we did at Tom Lee Park. And we tried to use every tool at our disposal to get the behavior right. And the first move we made, I think, was the strongest move we made, and it was underpinning everything else. We leaned into the narrative of Tom Lee. Tom Lee was this man. He was a packet boat operator on the Mississippi River. He delivered packages to businesses along the Mississippi River in a skiff boat. And in 1925, the Emmy Norman went down. It was its inaugural cruise. It was carrying members and their family, members of the Engineers Club and their families. And the boat began to sink. He happened to see it, and despite the fact he could not swim, he went back over and over and over through the evening and managed to save 32 people from drowning in the Mississippi River. It's a really treacherous river. If you're in a small skiff boat, you can only imagine, and you're trying to pull struggling people into the boat. It's an enormous act of courage. He was rewarded by the city of Memphis with a sanitation worker's job, and the Engineers Club bought him a small house. And interestingly, the mayor, who named what was just a spot of a park for Tom Lee, this was long before it was expanded, also named the park on the other end of the cobblestone. This is on the south end of the cobblestones, and the north end of the cobblestones is. The next year, he named that park Jefferson Davis Park. It's just such an odd juxtaposition. But no one in Memphis, everybody had forgotten who this guy was, right? And they certainly didn't, if they knew the name and sort of attached it to a person, they had no idea about his heroics, his courage. So one of the things we did right away was to lift up that narrative and make his story widely known. And we worked with his family, and we've done all kinds of things, and treated him as an everyday hero. One of the things he said was, "Well, I did what anyone else would do," and I thought it was that. So we used be like Tom Lee in the park to sort of set a culture. And we adopted this greeting, hi neighbor, our theory being everyone who enters this public space is equal as a neighbor. All you need to do is act neighborly, and you have a place in Tom Lee. Now, if you don't act neighborly, then, we may have to have a conversation. But it was this notion of, hi neighbor, you are welcome here, you belong here, and if you are a Memphian, you actually own a piece of this park. We set up a welcome center where we freely loaned equipment for anything you'd want to do in the park. And that was, I think, an act of generosity, kind of building on Tom Lee's generosity, and it indicated we trust you. And I think setting up these cultural, the values of the park that came through in the narrative and the actions were really important. And then the Sunset Canopy, which I had many arguments about, putting basketball at the center of the park because we all know who plays basketball. And that was, like, really going to do this? Yes, we're really going to do it. But the canopy is all about a telegraphing of who this park is for. And it's really for all. We've done skating, people do picnics. It's just a phenomenal gathering space that I think put a real, anchor in the middle of the park. It anchored the rest of the park. And then you can see classes of all sorts, and this is, using the artwork there, the Monument to Listening. So it's a very active park. Here's another shot of the playground that is, and this is, you can see across the playground to the parents' deck that I was talking about. So it's a really nice place for parents to gather, and there's a lot of cross-class mixing there. The artwork, I mentioned this artwork, the Tom Lee artwork that we reset. We rededicated this during our opening with the Tennessee Mass Choir there, and that is his great-great-grandniece pouring water that had been gathered from holy places all over the world. And she poured that over his hand and into a container, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful ceremony that gave meaning beyond festival, beyond a festival. It gave meaning and weight to what this was a statement about who we are, not just a great public space. And then Monument to Listening, we've had so many groups travel to Memphis to just have some kind of meaningful ceremony at this piece of artwork, which is meant to be sat on and great, and used. Very accessible. And then we keep lifting up the Tom Lee narrative every way we can, with poetry contests, poetry commissions. And we did the Tom Lee's Gumption Revival Parade, which was in the park, and we had these great, we have these great pieces that people made and participated, and it was, once again, Tom Lee's family were there from all over the country. So it's such a gift to end up with a place that works as a public space, but also carries meaning and values, are embedded in it. And when you can get that, I think people are so much more respectful of the place, and respect results in really practical things: better maintenance, less trash, better behavior. It doesn't always work, but the more you can lift up, I think, that story, it really matters. And, so we work hard for people to meet someone new, and especially across class. And it's worked. Something's working, because 64% of people who visit the park say they met someone new there, which is exciting. And to me, that's what public space can do. It moves strangers a little closer together. And we live in a very divided way these days. Joe Courtwright, where are you, Joe? Yeah, right there. Joe taught me, we've worked together for years. Oh my gosh, she's my muse. And, one of the things Joe identified for me early on is how while we live in more racially integrated ways today, we live in more income segregated ways today. And that trend is not trending in the right direction. And then it impacts schools, right? And then it impacts where you do your grocery shopping. And I think that is one of the imperatives we have today, is to say, how can public space, stand as the force that doesn't let that kind of segregation and separation just completely wash over us, because we are literally like holding back, the waters at this point. And when we are facing such challenging times, we've all seen the nightmare playing out on the streets of Chicago. We know we need each other now, more than ever. And we know that we can't give in to the efforts to divide us by fueling our fear of strangers. And so that's what public space is all about, right? It's not to entertain us, it's to connect us. And, if there's anything you take away from what I say tonight, I hope you will sort of take that as a North Star to guide what you decide to do on your waterfront. I'm going to wrap up. I know I've been long. I'm sorry. But I kind of love telling the stories. Okay, so I've got a little challenge for you, and I'm going to see if you'll go along with it. If we're not going to give in to the efforts to divide, and look, you guys are making up the new book, right? You're writing the new story about how we fight against this, and good for you. But I'm going to ask, for those of you who don't want to get an inflatable costume, and for those of you who, for some reason, don't want to come out Saturday, for those of you who just want something simple you can do every day, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. I want you to say hello to a stranger. I want you to say it kindly. I want you to imagine that person is your neighbor, because, we need neighbors, and we need them now. Look, compliment their kids, ask the dog's name. If there's nothing else you can think of, comment on the weather. Because there are a lot of people in this room tonight, and if each one of you would say hello to a stranger every day for the next 30 days, that's not so hard. That's like each one of you are producing 30 important moments of public life. And about 100 people here. So that's 3,000, right? 3,000 new neighbors, 3,000 fewer strangers at the end of that. And just imagine if half of them that you speak to caught the bug and they did the same thing. Collectively, that's 45,000, I need Joe, 45,000 acts of connection, which I think is a small civic miracle built on simple hellos. Because showing up is what produces public life. Not the public space, we need the public space, but it's you showing up is what produces public life. And each of us can nudge behavior. We control our behavior, but we can nudge the behavior of others, I'm convinced, by just simply reaching out. So step into public life, be the first on the dance floor, be the public life facilitator who opens the circle of belonging. I think the wonder of Portland is its ability to self-organize. You got to wonder, who was that first guy in the inflatable, right? He's the one who started the trend. He's the one who started the movement. So it doesn't take much, you know? I think be that person who says hello to strangers. Look, those of us who live in cities have been, you know, particularly your city and mine, we've been called the enemies from within. It doesn't get more direct than that. But if we can pause our fear long enough to join strangers in shared space, to line dance in front of federal facilities or join a bike ride through the city, naked or unclothed or clothed, you know, we can feel a spark of solidarity that rebuilds cities and rebuilds hope. And again, that is the true purpose of public space, not entertainment, but connection. And despite all these forces that are standing in opposition to connection, I think we must and we will keep making it in public space. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions. I love you, Portland. There we go. Here's the coffee break.
Where to start? I am really curious about the program of the park. Who actually does that? Is that also the same entity that built it?
Yeah, Memphis River Parks Partnership is a 501c3. We have a management agreement with the city, and we do. And the organization does the programming for the park. However, when I say that, lots of people come and want to do programs in the park. And the more we can become a platform for the activities others want to organize, it's great.
And how does it get paid for?
We have a combination of revenue streams. We do have a management agreement with the city, and the city provides about 40% of the operating budget. Then we get grants, we have some earned revenue from facility rental, park rental. So that's about what it looks like.
And that covers both maintenance and programming?
Yeah, maintenance at all of our parks. I mean, maintenance is always a negotiation.
Yeah.
Because we like to get things fixed in a hurry, so sometimes we do it ourselves. But in fact, the city is supposed to fund maintenance on all of our parks except Tom Lee, and we agreed because we were going to build a really ambitious park. We agreed that we would take care of the maintenance.
I'm curious how Studio Gang and Scape was selected. You said the mayor's task force. This is really tinny. Did the selection, but how did tell me? Let's talk a little bit about how that happened. Who knew them? Who brought them in?
Yeah.
I mean, was that you? Was that someone else? How did that happen? Because I mean, those are two of the best design firms in the world, really. And it seems like you did it without any sort of process on the face of it. So I'm really just kind of curious about how that happened.
Well, okay. The short version is me. The longer version is the rationale for why we chose them. And the way Studio Gang got there, it was not because of the great architectural work they do. It was because they had done the first time I became intrigued with the possibility, they were in the first Chicago Biennial. They had an exhibit on the police station. It was the evolution of policing and the physical nature of policing, which started a cop in a box on the block, the cop on the block, and then how that morphed over time to get farther and farther and farther away from the community, so that now police stations, are surrounded by parking. And they had done that project in Chicago where they built the basketball courts. But what was interesting was looking at the evolution. I then hired them when I was at night to do a piece of work. We and William Penn Foundation in Philly hired them to do when we conceived of reimagining the Civic Commons, which was an initiative to look at how public assets could be, civic assets could be connected to one another. they did that work for us, which I think is still a stunning piece of work that is that I have a copy of it, and it's actually a really interesting model, Randy, for downtowns, sort of rethinking how they use the collection of civic assets they have. It's very provocative, and I loved that work because I was as interested in connecting the riverfront to to downtown and the neighborhoods surrounding as I was in what was built in the park. I mean, for me, it was all about it was the connections mattered, and the ability to think not about an object called a park, but really at that next scale was what I saw in Studio Gang. And then it turned out Jeannie had done a lot of work on the Mississippi River Flyway earlier in their career. And so it just made a lot of sense to hire them. And then Jeannie brought Scape to the table, and I'm so glad she did. Yeah, they were a great team.
Yeah, I can only
Yeah.
imagine. Who has questions? Just wave your hand and we'll pick them up. Come on. Yeah, I knew there were some more out there. So today you maybe expressed a bit of skepticism about a design competition. We're kind of pretty far down that road. But have you been involved with design competitions? And I'm curious what what you would say are the ingredients to a successful one.
I have, but I can't tell you the ingredients for a successful one.
Because they weren't successful, or because
I think some of my prejudice, and it is prejudice, it goes back to my marketing days. When you, I guess in the old days where you'd invite an advertising, you'd invite 4 advertising firms to come in and, compete for your business. And I always thought that was a really bad way to choose an ad agency too, because it's like they didn't know our business at that point, and they couldn't know our business. So how am I supposed to judge what I wanted to see was the work they had done previously. I don't want to see what they'll do for me, because they should not know, and they shouldn't think they know what they're going to do for me. They don't know my business, and they didn't know our city. And so I never chose an ad agency, and we did award-winning advertising, by the way. For a regional bank, we kind of a puny bank at the time, but we did nationally recognized advertising because I picked a good firm, a firm that had done good work for other people that I thought kind of matched what we needed. So, I think the same thing is true about design. And sometimes I think we ask, I just hate that firms have to run around and compete in that way, dog and pony shows. And I don't know, it just always turned me off. So it's probably born out of some prejudice elsewhere.
fair enough.
But I also don't, I also think design competitions can take a long, long time, and then people change and you lose momentum, and, I don't know. But I'm sure they work for in many situations, including this one.
I think Portland's had mixed success with them.
That's great.
Yeah, you produced the Portland building, but it also produced, Pioneer Courthouse Square.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Check.
Yep. The aerial tram.
Check.
Yeah. So there's.
Okay. I'm not
sometimes.
trying to convince you not to.
No. I just wanted to hear a little bit more if you'd had experience with it.
I'm with great humility. I'm here. I just want my inflatable costume before I leave. I heard y'all heard there's a big run now. You can't get them for Halloween because everybody wants one. Oh, really? Really? Check them out, but I can't take it home. Oh, I could do that.
You want to go down?
If there's line dancing involved, I'm totally in.
Let's see here. Sure if I can read that writing. Well, one of the simple ones was: are there particular parks that you, waterfront parks that you would recommend the Portlanders go see?
Yes, I think Detroit Riverfront Conservancy has done a phenomenal job there. It's mostly a linear, path with these spots of great parks, and they're just opening a new one, a big new one this month. I love what Philadelphia has done. I mean, they're in Chicago Riverfront, but again, I think you can be inspired by them, but then what are the conditions here, and what are the needs here, what are the opportunities here unique to Portland. So but I know there are also some really exciting new parks in San Francisco, so yeah.
Um, how do you mitigate? How do the designers and the design mitigate the unpleasantries of the highway next to the park?
Well, it's not a highway; it's a city street,
Oh,
and
that's like a Salt Lake City size.
oh, well, no, and it's not that big anymore. I didn't show you any new pictures, and actually, the city we had to pay $1 million to repave the street, which is really irritating. And then after we built the park, they decided, we got a new mayor, and he decided, good for him, that we would take the road down to 2 lanes from Union, the street I live on, all the way down past Tomley Park, which, slowed traffic considerably, and still has parking, which I wouldn't do beside the park. But you have to go really slowly because it is a very confusing street now, and I think that's by design. And I think they're now going to take it up north behind the museum because the museum developers really want it too. So I think traffic will end up being very slow along Riverside Drive, and I credit the mayor. I wish he would have closed it, but this was the next best thing.
Are there commercial tenants in the park?
There are not commercial. Well, that's not true. There's a Ben and Jerry's in the park, and we have run a food operation as well. We started out with really good ambitions about having small businesses in the park, a food vendor and coffee vendor, but neither was really prepared to sort of adjust to park life and park hours. But if I had more time, I think we could have done that much, much better. It's one of the points I made today. If you're going to do any restaurant, any retail, you need to do enough that they can be a destination. You don't have to decide, I want coffee or I want a whatever before going there. You need to have, go there, let's go there for lunch, and then we'll figure it out,
Yeah. Is it open 24/7?
It's supposed to close at 10, but it's beautifully lit at night, and they don't run anyone out of the park unless they're doing something they shouldn't be doing.
No. And does the Conservancy also pay for security?
Yes, we do not have security in the park during the day. We do have security at night.
That makes sense. Yeah. Let's see here. So, were Indigenous people included in the sort of outreach and understanding of the land and how the park might be shaped?
That's a really interesting question. There is, my daughter actually has Indigenous heritage, but there is very little, in Memphis, there is very little presence or organization of Indigenous people. you can get to Philadelphia, Mississippi, and have a have a significant community. And our development director came from Philadelphia, Mississippi, and his mom taught there. So we kept trying to do some outreach, particularly because when de Tocqueville wrote Democracy in America, he wrote about observing Native Americans standing at the edge of the Mississippi to cross the river to go west on the Trail of Tears. And that what he was struck by was silence. And I worked for quite a while trying to find someone to do a procession or some sort of cultural expression that embodied, that embodied silence. And I raised it with multiple artists, including an artist who had worked extensively with Indigenous people and a couple of Indigenous artists. And it just I never could get anyone to sort of figure out what to do with that. But it's funny because we ended up doing this glorious procession for the opening, which I think may have. No. It was just this procession of you saw the Tennessee Mass Choir and the people coming down with the umbrellas. We started at the top of the bluff, processed down to the cutting of the ribbon, then processed to the Sunset Canopy where there was this fabulous performance, then processed to the Tom Lee Memorial, and people stuck with it. And it was this wonderful community, feeling of everybody processing together, which made me think I really should go back and try to pull that silent thing off.
Yeah, interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the Theaster Gates piece? You showed a picture of it, but I didn't really quite understand how it works.
So there were 32 people that Tom Lee saved, and so he has put 32 plus 1, 32 stools in a beautiful setting. And it's just like the minute you hit it, it's calm, it's peaceful, it overlooks the river. And then at the river's edge, he put additional stools, so 32 in all, plus 1 tall stool that represents Tom Lee. And Theaster always described it, again, as a monument to listening and this, deep listening to heal divisions, particularly racial division. And people it's funny, I thought, people they are going to be afraid to approach it and not know what to do with it. And and I've always tried to think about programming it, and I went to poetry and what could you do and was there recitation, but people actually figure it out themselves, and it's quite beautiful.
Are there other public artworks in the park?
Well, we have the original Tom Lee piece. We have this piece, or the 2 pieces that are part of a monument to listening, and that's it in that park.
In some ways, I find that kind of refreshing. I come from arts background, but I go up to Seattle's waterfront, and it's like this treasure hunt to find all the art pieces. And it feels like it kind of, they have less impact as a result, I think it's interesting when you kind of invest in just a couple of signature, pieces, and really help people to focus on that. So it's interesting, unusual. We had a couple questions about houseless people. Was the park designed with them in mind in terms of occupying space at certain times, or was it designed to keep them out? I don't know if Memphis has the same kind of houseless problem that that Portland has. We have a lot of unhoused people, and the mayor is working hard to try to change that, but it's still here, and it's a big factor in public space.
Yeah, I know it is. We don't have the problem to the extent you have, but obviously we have the problem or the challenge, and it was not designed. Certainly, was not designed for people without homes to live in the park, but we don't we don't try to keep them out. What we do is, again, if for any reason, this may be very unpopular here, but again, we kind of try to take that neighbor idea as a guiding thought, and we try to intervene in behaviors that we think are, will disturb others in some kind of meaningful way. Like, this will sound like a strange segue, but just bear with me. We don't allow smoking in the park. But people think, well, it's an outdoor venue. Come on, man, I can smoke. And our attitude is, we just go up and intervene and say, I don't want to kill your vibe, but, we got kids here. We don't really want people smoking. So just, if you don't mind just going out of the park, smoke what you need to smoke, and then come on back. We'd love to have you. So it's kind of a positive intervention. And if people are, spreading things around the park and, unloading the belongings everywhere, we encourage them to get them back together and put them in, order. And then, but we don't, we want a place where everyone feels like they belong, as long as they act in a neighborly fashion. And I know that sounds, that can say, well, who's to interpret that, and that's a fair point. But I also know the reality of public space is if people don't feel safe, they're not going to be there.
It's a difficult balance.
It is a very difficult balance. And what really irks me is that, my team, right? We had to clean up human excrement and no. People don't become park rangers to do that. Now, somebody's got to do it, so we do it. And I do it. But it is the problem, it shouldn't really filter down to public space managers. We need to solve that upstream so that, we're not dealing with it. And it's really easy to let us deal with it because then you don't have a budget for that. The budget's in the parks budget, right? And and it looks like you're paying for park stuff, but you're not paying for park stuff. In fact, I was just having a conversation with the woman who runs operations for our 6 miles of riverfront, and I said, so what's the most challenging thing? What's the thing that if you could get rid of, it would, the challenge you could get rid of that would make everything easier for you and your team? And she said, unsheltered people. And I said, and what do you estimate that's costing you? She said, 80% of our time. Wow. 80%. Now, that may be an overestimate, but she's on the ball. And it's like, is that really fair to everybody else? I don't know. I struggle with it.
Yeah, it's we keep trying things.
I know, but what we need,
all you can really do is keep trying,
we just have to deal with it upstream.
Yeah. I'm curious about outreach. You said that there was, some of the most economically challenged neighborhoods were not necessarily adjacent to the park, but kind of at the ends of it. What did outreach look like in order to really shape this park?
Multiple things. Keep in mind when we were doing this, we had lots of we had meetings and all kinds of things going on pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and then, so we did every design update. We had a model, we had a center. People could come in the center on the site because people were coming to the park. So we had a center, we had a model. We talked to anyone. We were there all the time. COVID hit. We put all of our design updates online. So, via Zoom. Everybody was learning to use Zoom at the time. And then once people started coming out, we started going outdoors, standing with all the, information and so forth. So, yeah.
And then you also did polling.
And then we did polling because we were having, the loudest voices, right, take over online and begin to guide the conversation. We've all had this experience. And so there was such strong comment coming from this festival that was in the park. I said, maybe we're crazy and we don't understand. People must, maybe people really hate this. And so I said, I'm going to do a statistically valid poll, just like a politician would do, running a race. And so we did, and we found that when you described what we were doing and the different features, people loved it. And we oversampled in the distressed neighborhoods because we really wanted to make sure this park was going to feel good to them. And they were some of the most young people, African Americans, which is good because we're a majority African American city, and women were the most enthusiastic people. People in the distressed neighborhoods were for them, it was like Disneyland. It was like, oh my God, you're going to put Disneyland in my neighborhood, and we used to use that all the time in the staff. We said, look, this has to be Disneyland for people who can never afford to go to Disneyland. We want them to bring their kids to this park and think, oh, wow, we're in Disneyland. And it really became something that we lived by. I mean, it was like, this place has got to be clean. You can't wait for, I can't wait to call the crew and hope they're going to get there by 3:00 to clean what I'm seeing at 1:00. No. It's my job to pick it up. And I picked it up all the time. And I had one great story I want to tell you. I went to one day, it was Sunday, and everybody was playing basketball, of course, jammed. We had a DJ there, and when I walked up, the DJ said, Brother John, he said, he was a miracle too. He said, oh, look, here's the lady that built the park. And which was funny. And everybody, and I was picking up trash. Here's the lady who built the park. And people put their stuff down and started clapping. Wow. All right? Yeah. And then they came up to me and said, oh, there were people who came up and thanked me. And so I continued picking up trash. Guess what they did? They joined me picking up trash. That's a hard story for me to tell because it still moves me, because it was like, we care about, we appreciate the fact that this space was made and we are welcomed here and we are going to work to clean it up. As fathers and sons, it was so beautiful. So, there are just lots of moments like that, and you see, I always tell my staff, 98% of the people who use our space are great people. 2% are knuckleheads, and they are the ones who eat up all your time and all your love. I mean, they suck your energy and they suck your focus, and you cannot let them dominate. And the same thing happened online. 2% of the people were just like, but they don't represent what we found in polling, were this huge group of people, overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, we got to wind it up. Yeah. So I want to end with, what are you doing now? What's next?
I'm a Bloomberg Fellow in the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation. And what I'm working on is, for the next 18 months, I'm working with a number of park leaders across the country, trying to figure out how we can get public space to foster social connection in intentional ways, particularly across class. And so, like if I wanted to do that, like I'm a park leader and I want to do that, there is no playbook for that. And so what I'm hoping is we can develop enough of a playbook that people who may say, I want to do it, but I don't know how to do it, this will say, here's a way for you to get started. Because I believe that is so fundamental to making democracy work, making society work, making opportunity for low-income people to get on the ladder. Raj Chetty would say that's, it's more important than your education. It's more important than your family status, is to be able to connect with people who have more resources than you do and bigger networks. And so how do you use public space to foster economic opportunity? And, that's all I think possible if we can figure out how to really make those social connections, which is why you need to say hello. All
right.
Or as in the South, we say, hey, how are you? And they reply, fine, how are you? That's the Southern way of saying hello.
I want to thank our sponsors.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you. You're sweet.
I want to quickly thank our sponsors, Columbia Bank, and North Star and Cascadia Partners. And I want to thank you all for being here tonight. We have a few seats. We're having a little happy hour.